Well, happy Thursday, everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well, staying healthy and safe at home. We're going to do a little lesson today on distance formula. You're just going to watch this right now, and then I'm going to give you some practice problems to actually go through and do. So, distance formula is used to find the distance between 2 points that are on a graph. So if I gave you, for example, these 2 points and I asked you to find the distance between them, there's a couple different ways you can do that. Okay, since this is actually given to you on a graph, we might be able to draw in a shape that is a little bit more familiar to us to find the length of that segment. So maybe we draw in a right triangle like this. If we use the right triangle, we can use what we've been doing with Pythagorean theorem to find the distance between 2 points. And then I'm also going to show you how to use the formula so you can see the relationship between the two. So if the length of this segment here at the bottom is 4, and the length of the segment on the side is 6. So I'm trying to find the length of x. So since I know it's a right triangle, I can go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem. Remember, Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Let's see if I can get this to do what I want it to. Okay, so with Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Remember, c has to be the hypotenuse, so the side across from the right angle. A and b are going to be the legs. Okay, so I'm going to do 6 squared plus 4 squared to get c squared, or x squared. 6 squared is 36. 4 squared is 16. I'm trying to figure out what c squared actually is. So 36 plus 16 is 52, which is equal to c squared. And to figure out what c is, since it's squared, you end up taking the square root. So I can use my calculator to figure out the square root of 52. If you don't have a calculator with you, you can always just use one and search, on Google to figure it out. But if I do the square root of 52, that's approximately 7.2. Okay, so the length of that segment would be 7.2. Now, let's take a look at this as if we were to use the distance formula. So with distance formula is this. It is the square root of, you take whatever the x coordinates are, and you're going to subtract it, and then you're going to square them. To that, you're going to add whatever the y coordinates are when you subtract them, and you're going to square those as well. So let's take a look how that kind of relates to what we just did here. Okay, so these 2 coordinates here on the graph are the points 0, -1, and over here it's the points -4, 5. Okay, we're going to use that distance formula. Okay, so again, the points are 0, -1, and -4, 5. It doesn't matter which point you call 1 or 2. It's just kind of like slope, x and y, x and y. I'm going to call this x1, y1, x2, y2. It doesn't really matter which one is x and y. So I'm going to start by plugging in these values into this part of that equation. Okay, so my x number 2 is 0, minus my x number 1, which is -4. So remember, when you're subtracting a negative, that turns into a positive again, and we're going to square it. Plus, we're going to do the y2, which is -1, minus y1, which is 5, and we're going to square that. Okay, so 0 plus 4 is 4, and 4 squared is then 16. So I'm going to put that off to the side over here. Oops. So I've got the square root of 16. Over here I've got -1 minus 5, so that turns into a -6, and -6 squared is Make sure you, if you're entering that in the calculator, you put parentheses in. Negative 6 squared is 36. So I take the square root of 16 plus 36. Now that should look a little familiar to when we did this before with the distance up here. Okay, so look, up in this equation, we had 36 plus 16. Over here we have 36 plus 16. So these two are very closely related. I'd have the square root of 52, which again, we already said is 7.2. Okay, so if you are fortunate enough to have a grid, it's probably easiest for you just to use Pythagorean theorem. So let's look at this one over here. Again, it's on a grid, so I'm going to draw in the right triangle. And this is 2, and this is 2. So this is my x. So again, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. My a is 2, my b is 2, my c is x. That's what I'm trying to find. So I've got 4 plus 4 equals x squared. 8 equals x squared. If I take the square root of 8, I'm going to get approximately 2.83. Okay, now let's try that same thing again with the distance formula. So remember, we have 2.83 for x. So we're going to practice using that distance formula now, because not everything is going to be given to you on a graph. You actually might just have coordinates. So here's what we got when we used Pythagorean theorem, was 2.83. So now again, here's our distance formula. You take the x's, subtract them and square them, and you add that to what you get when you do the same thing with the y's. Subtract them and square them. Okay, so if I look at my points here, the coordinates are 1, 0, and 3, 2. So I'm just going to label these x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to start plugging those into my formula here. So x2 is 3 minus 1. Okay, my y2 is 2. So when I take the square root here, I've got 3 minus 1, which is 2. And then 2 minus 2, which is 2, or sorry, 2 minus 0, which is 2. So I've got the square root of 4 plus 4, which is the square root of 8, which we said is 2.83. Okay, so again, you're going to need to know how to use the distance formula, and you're going to have to know how to use this if you were to draw a triangle and using Pythagorean theorem. Okay, I'm going to have a Delta Math that's assigned to you for you to practice these skills, along with practicing some Pythagorean theorem. I'm also going to start a Google Meets at the beginning of your class if you have questions or if you just want to join in and say hi. But I hope everyone's doing okay, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Google Meets.